College football, a busy week we just got out of, and another one we're heading right in towards. Frank Frangi's not here with us this week, but he'll be back next week. Alessandra, we're talking about a lot of good stuff that happened to our local teams and some other not so good stuff for if you're a Miami Hurricanes fan. But first off, the Georgia Bulldogs, man, they ran through Kentucky. That's probably not a good sign for Florida. But, man, Georgia looked like the #1 team.
I thought it was going to be, I mean, I knew Georgia was going to win, but I thought it was going to be a little closer. 51-13 the final score, which is just an absolute blowout for Georgia. It seems like really no one can stop the Bulldogs. Carson Beck, 28 for 35, 389 passing yards, 4 touchdowns. It's his third straight game with at least 300 yards passing for the Mandarin alum, obviously. I mean, you just can't stop him. He's doing so well in his first starting season for the Bulldogs.
I mean, Brock Bowers, he is a separate beast that is just unbelievable, talking about maybe one of the top tight ends in college football history when all is said and done. But Georgia looked more like the #1 team last week.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
Again, you're still playing in SEC country, playing an SEC play, and you got a tougher finishing stretch in conference play. But how does Georgia fare this week?
You know, Georgia is going to be playing Vanderbilt 12 p.m. on CBS. I mean, they outscored Vanderbilt 117-0 in their past 2 games. So if that kind of can tell you exactly what we're probably going to see this weekend, it's probably not going to be a game that you really want to watch, to be honest. It's going to be another Georgia Bulldogs blowout. They look like they'll be heading to the national championship this year. I think, you know, you gotta say it.
They look like the #1 team. They'd kind of dropped in the AP rankings in terms of the first place votes. They had kind of seeded over the last few weeks where they weren't as impressive. But again, last week looked more like Georgia. Speaking of the opposite sideline, the Florida Gators get back on track. They had a big win over Vandy, and now they go back out on the road somewhere that's not been kind to them this year.
Yeah, 38-14, Florida won. They are going back out to South Carolina, 3:30 p.m. SEC Network. The one thing that Florida has on their side, they're undefeated in the Swamp. Obviously, they're on the road this week, but 4-0 in the Swamp is something to be very proud of as a Florida Gator. 495 total yards for the Gators this week. Graham Mertz, 30 for 36, 254 pass yards, 3 touchdowns. 2 of those went to the converted tight end, Arliss Boardingham. So it was a very good showing for the Gators. Obviously, they needed to get back on the winning streak after their very disappointing loss to Kentucky 2 weeks ago. The last 2 games were both blowouts by both home teams for USC and for Florida heading into this week. Obviously, in 2021 in Columbia, South Carolina beat Florida 40-17. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a hard game for Florida. Absolutely. Definitely going to be a very good SEC game, but a hard game for Florida.
Spencer Rattler in South Carolina, not the start that they had anticipated, but again, Florida's been a little bit hot and cold as well, too, especially trouble on the road. So going up to Columbia is going to be a tough one for Florida. Florida State looked very good last week against beating Virginia Tech, a game that was a little closer in the third quarter, but Florida State goes on to win big in that game. Ranked #5 in the country. You know, I thought their most difficult ACC test is out of the way in Clemson. Miami game's still there, but again, you got still have some things you got to take care of if you're Mike Norvell in Florida State.
Yeah, I liked Florida State this weekend. They moved up 1 ranking to #4. So this was the college football playoff rankings. They would be in the playoffs. And I think they're positioned very well to go into the CFP, and they'll probably make the top 4. You know, I like Florida State. They're 5-0 for the first time since 2015. The really good thing that Florida State had this weekend is their ground game. Trey Benson, career best 200 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 of them from 85 and 62 yards out. He's the first running back with 200-yard games since Dalvin Cook did it twice in 2016, way back in the day. Which doesn't seem that long
I can't believe
ago,
Dalvin Cook has been gone that long. And, you know, last but not least, it's kind of the coaching decision heard around the country, and you're scratching your head. Miami, Georgia Tech last week. Miami, all they've got to do is take a knee. Clock is running in the 4th quarter. Instead of taking a knee, they run another play. Running back fumbles. Georgia Tech recovers. And what do? They drive the field, score the winning touchdown. Mary Cristobal said, you know, he took responsibility for it, but how do you do that? I mean, a high school coach would not make that mistake.
It's embarrassing.
And how did that happen? And you're going into another big game this week against North Carolina. How do you shake that off?
Yeah, I mean, listen, they're going to shake it off. It's not going to, listen, it's in the past for them, but it's embarrassing. How do you not take the knee. You're winning. Take the knee. I think he was trying to prove something to the world, maybe, or just really to the nation, as for the Miami Hurricanes. But he definitely made a statement, not the one he wanted to. It's embarrassing. But you know what? On to the next week.
Not the one you wanted to if you're Miami head coach. And again, Miami was undefeated until last week. That loss against Georgia Tech. They've got UNC this Saturday. That will do it for a look at college football in this edition of Campus Corner. Frank Frangie will be back with us next week. That'll do it for sports.